Welcome to this special online event, Pressing On Positive Impacts from a Pandemic Year. I'm Nicole Tschetter, the Public Relations Manager for Denver Rescue Mission. We're so glad you are joining us today. In a year with so many challenges, we are thankful to share with you the positive impacts that have come out of finding new ways to serve those facing homelessness during the pandemic. The mission has experienced significant changes in the way we provide emergency services and opportunities to transition out of homelessness. We will be learning about those today. Joining us is Brad Miley, our President and CEO, on his reflections of how the mission has been impacted in the last year. And also joining us is Deb Butte, our Director of Homelessness Resolution, on how her team of 15 staff members are helping our guests move out of homelessness and towards self-sufficiency. You will also meet John, a mission guest whose life has changed after he came to the mission as a result of job loss due to the pandemic. His story of impact is heartfelt. Through severe winter temperatures to economic changes, thank you for all of the ways you have come alongside Denver Rescue Mission. We cannot do this work without our supporters and volunteers like you. And we look forward to sharing the direct impact your support is making. Let's dive into hearing from our presenters today. Brad and Deb, thank you both so much for joining us. Brad, this has been a year like no other. Tell us about some of the biggest changes that have taken place and the positive impacts we've seen as a result.
Well, Nicole, I just want to say how excited I am that we're talking about the positive impacts in this pandemic year. Like most of us, this year has really been a hard one. These last 12 months have been very difficult in many, many ways. But we have really looked at this and said, what kind of good things have come out of this? And there's really too many good things to share. And I'm just really excited about the good things that have happened. And throughout this pandemic, we have tried to say God is in control and really just focused on the fact that no matter what happens, we know that God's in control. But what has happened, here's some, I think, really positive things. We moved over and started operating the National Western with 763 beds. From there, we moved to the Coliseum and 48th with approximately 300, another 274, 574 beds. And I think one of the good things that we learned is the Denver Rescue Mission isn't about a place. It's about serving God's kingdom wherever we are. And so if you have the Denver Rescue Mission logo on your vest, on your t-shirt, or Hope Starts Here, we love that phraseology too on our t-shirts, you know, we can be anywhere serving the Lord. So that's been a positive thing, that we've been able to be flexible, to move into these different locations. And one of the things that I'm very excited about that's come through all this is the advent of 24/7 shelter. We were trying to do this as a city, move all the shelters to 24/7, meaning 24 hours, 7 days a week. And we were supposed to do that in 3 years as a city. We had to do it in a few weeks. It was pretty incredible that we were able to do that. And as a result of that and of the movement that we've had, I'm also very excited of something in the future, and that is we're going to be operating what we call 48th East, which is about 100 yards from 48th West. It's a city-owned facility that we will be operating on behalf of the city with about 474, 475 beds. And I think these are all good things, but there are a lot of other good things I could talk about, but these are just some of the very positive things I feel like have happened.
Thanks for starting us off on such a positive note, Brad. Deb, we'd love to also hear some of the benefits we've seen from your perspective, especially more about the homelessness resolution team.
You know, I was actually probably a little leery of 24/7 shelter as we've talked about it over the last year, and or previous to COVID happening. And when we moved, it was great for me to say, I have changed my mind. I have seen that our clients have been able to access more resources and get more help because of 24/7 shelter. So some of those things that I would say have been positive outcomes are our people are no longer spending time queuing up for shelter. They're no longer spending time moving from one location to another. And the thing that helps is the client is no longer spending a lot of their time thinking about how to be homeless. They're not thinking about how to stand in line. What time do they need to get someplace? What do they do to carry all of their belongings? They are in a place that is stabilized. And because they're there, they're not losing things like vital documents that they would tend to lose when they would get on a bus and move to another location. So our case managers are able to move people forward faster because they're not duplicating work, reproducing work that they've already done with a client. Another thing that's been really helpful is our staff that's in the shelter managing people. They're no longer spending all the time moving clients from one location to another. And so the atmosphere, the hypervigilance of our clientele has decompressed, and our staff is able to have more beneficial conversations with the client, talking about what's your plan, how are you moving forward. And so there's a unified messaging among our staff talking to clients about how do we make sure that this is not just a night by night solution, but this is a solution that is moving you forward into more stable housing where you can be more self-sufficient. Another great thing about 24/7 shelter is that we can find them at their bed. And there is a lot of work that we do in collaborating with the city. Denver Rescue Mission does not work in a silo. We are absolutely connected to the community. And we do a lot of hard work making sure that we know where else our clients are connected and what work has been done for our clients in the community. And so when there are time-sensitive documents or when their case might be closed because another caseworker in the city can't find them, we're able to actually go to the client's bed and say, hey, we need you to sign this paperwork. And so there's just some very concrete, visible benefits to being able to engage a client to actually move them forward because of 24/7 shelter.
And Deb, what changes were necessary to open up and run these 24/7 shelters?
Boy, as I think about that, the big thing is staffing. We now have had to hire on board and train staff to work with our population, not just on one side of the clock, but on both sides. But what I would say is last year about this time, as our donors that are watching know, the world stopped. And it stopped at the rescue mission too. So the staff that we had hired on prior had job descriptions, right? They were hired on with the thought of, I will be doing this kind of job. And our staff swiveled to very different positions. And I never heard anyone say, that's not my job, that's not what I was hired on to do, that's not my lane. Caseworkers became bus loaders. Intake workers became hand washing station movers. Peer navigators became scanners at the door. And so what was necessary is for everyone to just say what's needed and what can we do and why couldn't we do that? And so that really has kind of created an innovative spirit and a spirit of no one being territorial, but really just doing what needs to be done.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Deb. And Brad, what changes, if any, did you have to implement to help support these 24/7 shelter facilities?
I just want to add to what Deb just said. I think the camaraderie when you're in a fight like this, when you're in a battle, has been just an incredibly positive thing. At the same time, in November of 2019, we had about 205 employees. Today we have over 300 employees. We had to go out into the community and try to get some more people to come on board and help us. Initially, we were hiring temporary people. And so the folks that had lost their jobs working in restaurants and retail were coming to the Denver Rescue Mission for a job. And this is another great thing that came out of it. One was being able to give them jobs, even if it was for a temporary period of time to help them. And I'll never forget coming into a room where we had 4 or 5 new temporary employees coming on board. And we didn't have masks. We weren't using masks at the time. And the battle had just begun. We weren't socially distancing. And I can remember saying, thank you for joining us in this fight. And I'll never forget one of the gentlemen said to me, thank you for giving me a job. I'm just so glad to get a job. And we have had some of those temporary employees become permanent employees. And they said, had this pandemic not happened, I never would have had the opportunity. I never would have really thought about coming to the Denver Rescue Mission. I talked about the 48th East coming on board, and we're going to go from basically 205 some employees to probably close to 360 employees. That's a lot of people to come on board and be a part of this. And so we've really had to step up to be able to interview people, to be able to have people join us in this battle.
Brad, could you share what the response from the community has looked like throughout the pandemic?
Frankly, it's been incredible that people have come alongside of us financially. We would not have been able to expand the number of folks. We would not be able to commit to some of the other things that we've been able to commit to as the need has grown, had it not been for the financial provision of this wonderful community that we live in. I'm fond of saying that we hope that God never takes his hand off of us, because we are so reliant on him for his provision. And he has worked really just in a wonderful way to allow us to continue this great work.
And Brad, along with the financials, did you see a lot of people in the community step up to volunteer as well?
This was an incredible thing to have people just be willing to come alongside of us and volunteer. In the beginning, without masks, but even now with masks, they've come to 48, they came to the National Western, they came to the Coliseum. Yes, they wanted to continue to volunteer. It's moving to see that, and we couldn't do this work without them.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Brad. Deb, also taking a look at this past year, can you tell us about one of the hardest things you've come across throughout the pandemic?
The people that are involved as staff at Denver Rescue Mission are there because they care about people, right? And they care particularly about hurting people. One thing that was obvious when the pandemic happened and everyone had to stay home is that everyone that had a home was taken out of the city. And what we saw as we drove from one location to another is who was left. The people that were left were the people that were in our facilities. And I think it just made our staff realize the gravity and the weight and the importance and the honor that it is to work with the people that were left, the people that had nowhere to go. We were their place to go, and they are hurting people. And so I think one of the hardest things, but one of also the blessings, was realizing that our work is really purposeful and it's meaningful and that it matters to God. And that it really is life and death for some people. And then I think the other thing that's just hard is because it is an emergency. It is something that we might not see again for decades, maybe 100 years, of that people, didn't take vacation time. They worked long hours. And so just seeing that with that purpose, it stretched people. And so trying to balance that of take care of yourself. Make sure you take care of yourself because we need you here. But also the need is great. And so thanks for showing up.
And Deb, I'm sure over the past year and through years even before that, you've been witness to many remarkable stories of our guests. Do you mind sharing one from the past year specifically?
I think specifically of what I spoke to earlier, of there just being a unified vision among the staff. Regardless of the work that we're doing, there's a unified vision of let's help people exit homelessness into a more stable environment. And so we call emergency services coordinators. They're really the people that are rubbing shoulders with our guests in the day-to-day, meeting the immediate needs in the shelter. And they noticed that there was just a vulnerable client that needed more care and more help. And so they reached out to the case managers and said, hey, can you work with this gentleman? This is a gentleman that really can't make it to a scheduled appointment because he's an older gentleman, struggles with some cognitive disability, would have a hard time keeping track of the time of day or what day of the week it was. And so the case managers were actually able to outreach him at his bed, and in engaging with the client realized that he was probably eligible for a Social Security disability income. And so we have been great at bringing community providers either online through community or through computer online appointments, or actually people entering into our shelter systems to be able to help our clients. And so we connected this client with a Social Security disability, and then we did the hard work that we do in just hunting down where else might this client have been engaged in the past. We found out that in the recent past he was engaged in a mental health community center, where we know that community center had connections to housing, and if we could get him reconnected with them with proof of an income, that we could possibly open up some housing applications for him. And so we were able to get the client re-engaged with them, and all of that collaboration and communication and helping with documentation helped that client become eligible for funds that opened up doors for housing for him.
That is so incredible to hear. Thank you so much for sharing. We're going to kind of shift gears here a little bit. We have a big project currently taking place at our flagship location, the Jesus Saves building, as many refer to it, our Lawrence Street shelter. Brad, could you tell us a little bit more about this?
I'm so excited about what we've been able to do there. It's an older building built in the late 1800s, which the Denver Rescue Mission has been in since 1970. It is the Jesus Saves. It's kind of really been our flagship over the years. We put a ramp outside, we put an elevator in this old building, and then here's the wonderful thing. We had 200 beds upstairs that weren't socially distanced. And so now what we were able to do is redo really all the floors, but the basement, so that we can put those 100 beds downstairs, basically 100 beds upstairs, and maintain that socially distanced part. The wonderful thing is we have a new fire sprinkler system, we have a new HVAC system, we have a new generator so that we can keep power to that facility if power goes out. If anyone has been to our Lawrence Street shelter in the past, I'm looking forward to being able to show this to you, because you will not believe it. We're just very, very excited. And this was a partnership with the city. We provided some funds, and then the city provided some funds. And the really great news is not only will we preserve the beds, but some of those folks, Deb, that suffer from ADA kind of things will be able to come into this facility. And that is not something that we were readily able to do before. And they'll be able to stay with us. So we're very excited about that.
This is super exciting news to hear. Do you have any initial reactions of hearing about the Lawrence Street shelter?
One thing that we really hope to use Lawrence Street for is helping that employed worker that just needs a good launch pad, that needs a little bit more flexibility in what hours he can come in, because his job might get him off at 11 o'clock and the doors are closed in the other shelter. So this would be a location where that person that's employed that needs just a few weeks to get their feet underneath them so that they can really move to a long-term plan will be a good place for them to have some more flexibility so that they can launch faster.
Thank you both so much for sharing your input on this exciting news happening at the mission. Tell us, Brad, with so much uncertainty still ahead, how are you and our leadership team planning for 2021?
Probably a lot like we planned in 2020, trying to be flexible. We're using something that we call adaptive leadership. It's really kind of looking and saying, okay, what needs to be done? What needs to be done in 2021? Already talked a little bit about 48th East. We're very excited about bringing that online. That'll probably come online sometime around May. Reopening the Lawrence Street shelter, which will occur, we think, the end of March. And then the other thing that we've worked hard on is a strategic plan over the last 3 years, and we were in the third year of that plan. Kind of pivoted a little bit on that, and said, what are the things that needed to be done? And so we are always trying to seek God's will in what He would have us do. I've learned this isn't about what Brad Miley or Deb or Nicole wants to do at the Denver Rescue Mission. It's about trying to get aligned with what God wants us to do. And so that's really kind of been our view, or the way that we have tried to be flexible as we've gone along like this. And as a part of that we had a catastrophe during this recent cold snap. The tower, which is part of the crossing, which has approximately 85 men in our New Life program, had a water break. I'm sure there's water breaks all over Denver. There were certainly all over Dallas, as an example. And so we had to shift those men over into a hotel. And so now we're in the process of trying to renovate that building. Insurance is going to help us to a great degree, but we're going to have to renovate that building, and that may take 6 to 9 months. And so these are some of the things that come up that we just have to work through. And just like Lawrence Street is going to be a much better place after we're done there, we think the tower is really going to be a lot better place too for our men in our New Life rehabilitation program to be living and trying to turn their lives around.
Amazing things on the horizons at Denver Rescue Mission. And before we close out today, I'd like to open it up to both of you, Deb and Brad. And for everyone watching, just, if there's one thing you wanted them to remember about our conversation today or about the efforts here at Denver Rescue Mission from this past year, what would that message be that you would want to just share with them?
Listen, I always say we're really only as good as the community is. I mean, this is a wonderfully giving community that has helped us so much, and we're honestly so appreciative of that. I as well am so appreciative, as Deb said, of our staff, and they're willing to get COVID-19, to work through. We're trying to get every staff member vaccinated. We're trying to get every guest, client, participant, we're trying to get them vaccinated as well. I should have mentioned that a little bit earlier. But in the end, if I just had to say one thing, I would say the same thing that I've been telling our staff this whole time and our board of directors and every donor out there, is that God is in control, and we're going to trust Him through this time, through better times. Deb, I hope we don't have to face this for another 100 years, because I don't plan on being here in another 100 years. So, but God is in control.
And I would just say, we work with a clientele who don't have a lot of real life experience with people who stay around. And what our donors allowed us to do is be Christians that stay around.
Yeah.
And when everything else shut down and everyone else left, our donors allowed us to play the role of the people that were there. And so thankfully we have staff that want to be there. They don't want to be anywhere else. They're people that run in when other people run out. And so it's just a blessing to be able to do this work and to do what I think Christians do, is they stay around.
It's been truly remarkable, Deb and Brad, to see our frontline teams just head straight into the fire. Thank you so much for sharing a little bit more about all of their efforts and hard work over this past year. And thank you both from the bottom of my heart and from the bottom of the hearts of everyone watching for joining us today. Among so much change, it's so encouraging to hear the positive outcomes from this past year. I want to turn now to a special story. You're going to get an inside look into the life of one of our guests who has been served by our amazing mission teams during the pandemic. Here is John's story.
Being on the streets while the pandemic was happening, it was very difficult. There was no place to go, no place to get out of the heat, trying to find a bathroom to use, because everything is shut down. And the stigma of being associated with the homeless just makes it all that much worse. When I walked into the Denver Rescue Mission's emergency services shelter, they were there. They were there instantly. I started feeling relief.
The city of Denver and the health department felt like we needed to do something differently to be able to have more space. With all of the logistics and working with all of the various other service providers in the city of Denver, it was quite a challenge. I've had 2 people from my family die of COVID virus, and it made it very real that, this is not something that is just here for a moment and gone. We are in a battle against this disease, and we have to protect our people, protect ourselves. And this is what we have been called to do.
It was always a wonder, did I catch it? Am I catching it? Where do I go to get tested?
What we provide in the emergency services is shelter. In that shelter, we now currently provide 3 hot meals a day, showers, restrooms, personal laundry, as well as case management. We've noticed a drastic increase in our guests transitioning from shelter into permanent housing. Especially with the pandemic, guests have been more engaged in our case management, and that's been a huge testament to our case management team, who've been very involved with the guests and providing them the resources needed to transition them into that permanent housing.
We have agencies that during the worst of the pandemic wouldn't come into our facilities, wouldn't do certain types of cleaning or be in the dorm areas because they were concerned. Some of our temporary custodians, they just jumped right in, and sometimes cleaning was very difficult, but they were willing to clean out this bunk that had bed bugs or lice, or somebody had tested positive and had to be moved out of the facility, and we had to sanitize that area. And also my emergency service coordinator, they jumped into this. Sometimes, when the custodial crew wasn't there, they would be the ones to do the cleaning. But they were also the ones that were there when somebody was having a medical emergency or someone had overdosed. He did have some traumatic events, and I had staff that jumped in there and tried to administer first aid in a very severe situation, not thinking that I have to just protect myself, but they wanted to provide first aid to that person that was experiencing that crisis. I'm so proud of them. I'm so proud of them.
The Denver Rescue Mission at the New Life program, they really provided exactly what you needed to be able to start functioning again in society. In the beginning, it's not an easy thing for a person to come in to these programs. The hopelessness is everything. It's like, it's so dark. You're in this dark hole and you can't even see any light. But what Denver Rescue Mission provides, and what everybody that donates provides, is that light and assistance to climb out of that hole. Because you gave, I was the life that was saved. Thank you.
I hope you all enjoyed John's story of perseverance and faith. Brad and Deb, thank you so much for sharing with us today and for your unrelenting leadership through so much change during the pandemic. To those watching today, thank you so much for joining us and for all of the ways you support the mission, whether through financial support, prayer, or your time to volunteer. We invite you to consider supporting the reopening of the Lawrence Street Shelter by making a gift to provide a warm bed for our guests. Please visit our More Than a Bed campaign to learn more. If you are able to volunteer, we are especially in need of volunteers to help prep and serve meals at the Lawrence Street Community Center and 48th Avenue Center. We invite you to sign up for an upcoming shift. Those are available 7 days a week. Thank you again for joining us today and for all the ways you support the mission so that we can continue to serve those experiencing homelessness. We hope you have a wonderful evening, and we hope to connect with you again soon.